Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree. That's like the best $200 I've ever spent right there. Speaking of money,
Oops, wait.
oh, it's a fucking party in here. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Today, I'm gonna share with you the most clickbait thing that we've ever posted on the channel, how to get a long-lasting paint job. It all starts with this, the EAE primer, EAE primer. You can find this at your local jobber, or ideally, you can order it from this wonderful company, Southern Polyurethanes. They make the best epoxy on the market. This is not a plug, not a paid advertisement. I am not sponsored by SPI in any way, shape, or form. However, we do endorse their products because they're good, and that's all that matters. Why is epoxy primer important, you might ask? Well, probably the best foundational primer that you can put under any paint job that you're gonna do. It's a little bit slower than a 2K primer or polyester, right? It takes longer for it to cure and do its thing, but it provides superior corrosion protection and the best adhesion that you're gonna get out of any primer, right? It's worth the extra time. It's really worth the extra little bit of money. I think this kit runs something in like the $300 range, right? And you don't want to redo your paint job, right? Don't be one of those people. We're not using turbo cans. We're not using lacquer primer. We're not doing everything for $2. We're gonna take a little bit of extra time. We're gonna do it right the first time. And then we're never gonna do it again. And it's gonna look great, and all your friends are gonna ask you, hey man, who painted your car? And you're like, oh, it was me. Without any more filler here, let's get into how to use this stuff. So we already touched on kind of some basics, right, with the primer. It is the best thing that you can use over bare metal, old paint, body filler, pretty much anything. Ideally, though, you're gonna put it onto a bare substrate. What do I mean by that? I mean either steel, aluminum, fiberglass, plastic, the completely raw, bare material, right? That's the best place to start with any really quality, good paint job. However, not everyone wants to strip everything down, that's fine. This product can go over top of a lot of old stuff. What we got here going on today is a little mix of everything, right? That's why this is a good demonstration, okay? We got steel, right? This stuff is all DA'd in 80 grit, right? So the thing with epoxy is it does like a good mechanical bond, right? So anything steel, we're gonna sand with 80. Anything aluminum, like the little mirror caps over here, these are all sanded in 150 because aluminum is softer. So the profile of a 150 grit scratch creates the same kind of depth that you would get from 80 grit on steel, right? And then we got some bare fiberglass here, and this is sanded out in 150 as well. Again, because it's softer, right? So the tooth is gonna bite in a little bit harder on a soft material than it is on something like steel, right? Plastic, probably go a step further even. 220, 320, probably 320 is probably safer. That's even probably a little bit aggressive. There's some little bit of weird stuff about epoxy that's different than most conventional primers, right? Some rules you gotta follow, some things you gotta do. Make sure that you are reading the data sheet for whatever product you're going to be using. I always say, read the tech sheet, read it twice, know what you're spraying, follow the tech sheet. Don't follow what some person on YouTube is telling you if it doesn't correspond to what's on the tech sheet, okay? The people who develop the product spend a lot of money on it and making sure that they're providing you with something that's gonna work, but only in the parameters that they describe, right? So, this product, all of the stuff that I got prepped out that's over there has been wiped with wax and grease remover and has been sitting for about 2 hours now. We're making sure that we don't have any residual solvents or anything sitting on the surface. It's a little bit overkill. They recommend 45 minutes, but it's been 2 hours. The primer itself, this has been mixed with the activator and has also been sitting here for 2 hours, okay? This is called an induction period. A lot of epoxy primers recommend an induction period, which essentially means that you're mixing part A, part B together, stirring it up really good, and then you're just leaving the pot sit for normally 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the product. Product like this, they would recommend 4 hours even, right? They say that's like for the maximum holdout. If you want to do 4 hours, that's the best. The pot life on this stuff is like days, right? So as long as you seal the container, I could still spray this again tomorrow, the next day, probably the day after that, and it would still be fine, which is pretty weird, right? Normally with like a 2K primer, the stuff's getting jelly and like gumming up after like an hour in the cup. So the main gripe that a lot of people have with epoxy primer is that it's so slow, right? It takes so long for it to cure and flash and do its thing, and then top coating it, you gotta wait 8 hours, 12 hours, or overnight, right? But the cool thing is 90% of the time when you're recoating this stuff, if you're doing it in a timely manner, you don't actually even have to sand it, right? So in my eyes, it's one extra step, a little bit of extra time, but not that much real extra like physical exertion, which is kind of the real tiring part of like doing paint and body, is the sanding, right? The blocking and edging stuff out and doing all that. With a 2K primer, you spray that down, you gotta go back around all the edges and everything, you gotta scuff down everything all again before you recoat it. This stuff, I'm gonna shoot it on, I'm gonna leave this stuff sit probably over the weekend, and then I'm gonna come back on Wednesday and I'm gonna top coat all this stuff with some 2K primer without even touching the stuff, right? Which is awesome. It's providing me that foundational layer for really good adhesion, right? It's protecting the parts from corrosion, from any moisture or anything getting in to the steel or the aluminum and causing us issues later down the road. And then it's also gonna bite and bind into that 2K primer really well. They're gonna mesh together really well, and then I'm gonna have a nice foundation for me to start sanding and do my final sanding right before paint. Gun of choice for today is trusty old crusty, the LPH 400 LVX. This time I've got a 1.4 nozzle in here for the primer. The other cool thing about epoxy is you can shoot it with a smaller nozzle. So if you don't have a bigger dedicated primer gun, that might help. All right, well, we got our first coat on everything. Everything laid out real nice and smooth. And we're gonna let that flash for probably 2 hours, maybe 4. And then I'm gonna come back and lay another second coat on everything. The fiberglass stuff, I might do a third on. Normally with the bare fiberglass, 3 is recommended. 3 coats will help to stop from any of like the weave or any of like the little hairs and fibers kind of showing through when the paint job's out in the sun. I don't know if you've ever botched up prepping a fiberglass part before, and then you put it out in the sun and you see the little weave kind of poking through a little bit. You don't want that to happen, but epoxy is really good at stopping that from happening as well, for some chemical reason I don't understand, but also because it's very low shrinkage, right? So after this stuff's cured for about 4 hours, it's pretty much done doing all the shrinking it's gonna be doing. And from what I understand, it only shrinks maybe like, 2, 3, 4, 5% or something, very, very, very small amount, right? Which is cool. However, you're not getting a lot of mill build out of it, right? So you're not gonna be using this. You can stack it, but you're gonna have to stack it over the course of like every 8 hours spraying a coat if you wanna try to get some actual thickness out of it. That's where 2K high builds and, you know, epoxy hybrid primers and polyester come in, right? For more of those mills you're trying to get built up. Oh yeah, the other cool thing is you can put body filler straight over this stuff without sanding, and it actually adheres better than it does to the metal, which is cool. And then you have a nice barrier between the metal and the body filler, so you can't get corrosion back inside there on the metal. This actually is the best way to do body work. It's the way that we're handling it on that Porsche, and we'll show you guys a couple clips of that so you can get an idea of what we're talking about. I hope you guys enjoyed that video on epoxy. I think it doesn't get talked about enough. I think too many people get obsessed and talked about, you know, 2K and etching primer and all this like fast speed stuff for collision work and things to just get things in and out the door. Epoxy doesn't get talked about enough. It's very important. Make sure you use it on your projects. Anytime you got bare metal showing, lay a little bit of epoxy down. You can thin it out, use it as a sealer, then spray your 2K, right? Get a little bit better adhesion to the bare metal so you don't gotta worry about it flaking off later. Doesn't take that much longer, right? If you guys got anything from this video, aside from seeing my eyeballs up real close all the time, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Or, no, I'm not gonna say it. I got in trouble last time. I'm not gonna say anything. Catch you guys in the next video.